So a large number of current leaders in manufacturing have typically grown in an environment where hierarchy has been the way of working. As a result, a lot of decisions are being taken by a select few. Contrast that against the point that at the bottom of the white collar pyramid, we find a set of engineers who have been brought up in an environment of free exchange of ideas and knowledge, primarily due to the impact that internet has had on them. Now, contrasting these two, we find that the aspirations of the people who have joined this workforce new doesn't match with the styles of working of the leaders that have come up in a particular way, and these result in a conflict, which is where the demotivating environment comes from. I believe this is a phase that Indian manufacturing is going to pass through for at least a decade, and this is exactly what's also happening in many of our families. The response has to be balanced. Neither of the two, the leaders at one end and the frontline engineers at the other, can be alienated. So the biggest intervention that organizations can take is to help the awareness of leaders to this problem and provide them the coaching, the support and the guidance that they can get to be able to overcome this issue through greater awareness and an action that is specifically directed at creating a positive work environment for the frontline engineers. I'm not sure if it would be right to say that leaders in manufacturing as compared to services sector have got a shorter term focus, but there are certain fundamental differences between the manufacturing and the services sector that do contribute to the difference in the behaviors demonstrated by the leaders. There are three differences that we need to keep in mind. First, on an average, most of the sectors in services are younger to those in manufacturing, and that's reflected in the profile of the leaders we find in both these sectors. Second, due to the very nature of work, leaders in services have got a much better connect with people than those in manufacturing. The third difference between the services and manufacturing is that in services, the basic lever for value creation is people, whereas for those in manufacturing, the value creation is driven by asset utilization. And therefore, there is a lot more focus in services on how do we get the maximum out of the same set of people as compared to manufacturing. As a result, the focus of the leadership is very different in services than what we find in manufacturing. Directive as a leadership style is best used in short-term situations where there is a crisis and the leader comes in passing instructions to the managers on how do they resolve the crisis. So if we look at it from a services versus manufacturing comparison, I don't think the nature of services leads itself to any lesser crisis than what manufacturing does. On the contrary, the customer is much closer in services than manufacturing. So take an example, if a cockroach is found in the food, it leads to an immediate crisis in a restaurant, right? But that's not how it works in manufacturing. Therefore, the urge for a leader to step in and solve for the crisis using the directive style is as much in services as it would be in manufacturing. However, stepping back, we recognize that leaders, by the nature of the work and the evolution of the sector, have learned to empower their frontline much better than what manufacturing leaders have done. As a result, they use much less directive style, and even when they use it, it doesn't necessarily come across as being an inappropriate use of directive style as much as we find in manufacturing. Certainly, leadership impacts the work environment and work environment impacts performance. Imagine two situations. Situation one where the people are having an abysmal work environment, and the second in which they are having a highly motivating work environment. In the first situation, the people struggle to meet the minimum expectations of their job. In the second, they actually compete to hit the ceiling of their capabilities. In the second situation, the performance is far superior to the first one, and the difference between the first and the second is primarily created by the leadership of the working team. Therefore, if we can work on the leadership of manufacturing units, a big difference can be made to their performance. Certainly, a self-aware person certainly makes for a much better leader. However, we find that many of these leaders are quite unassuming, so they don't fit in the definition or expectation of an inspirational leadership in the traditional mode. At the root of it, it's the ability of a leader to consistently read a situation right and choose the right response to that situation every time, consistently, that makes him an effective leader. And greater self-awareness improves his ability to read the situation and select his response to that situation for maximum effectiveness. So let's decode Make in India. Make in India is talking about or projecting a growth in manufacturing at the rate of 14% for the next 8 years. The GDP is expected to grow at the rate of 7, which means that all that we are going to be producing, we can't be consuming it ourselves, and therefore we need to produce for the world markets more than what we are doing today. As a result, the quality of our products have to be much better and to global standards vis-a-vis what it is today. Better design, better engineering, better quality, better precision, and so on. The second implication of Make in India is a lot more investment has to go into manufacturing than what is happening today. Investment goes in when returns come in. Therefore, manufacturing has to guarantee superior returns and consistent returns than what has been guaranteeing so far. From a unit head's perspective, right, he needs to be working at both ends. At one end, he needs to make sure that the quality of his output is far superior to what he has been doing so far and consistent as well. And at the other, he needs to make sure that the way he is producing it guarantees better and consistent returns to the investor. And to me, Make in India comes to life when a unit head is able to do both of this at the same time. Absolutely. You're just aware of the outcomes of the first study ever taken on the leadership styles of manufacturing organizations. And Hay Group has invested in this because it believes it's very important to help leadership of manufacturing organizations make this transition. This has led us to create the Make in India Leadership Cell with 4 primary objectives. The first one is to continue this research into specific sectors and make it bring live the findings and the outcomes in the most relevant manner for the manufacturing leaders. The second objective is to create the institutional framework, both at the government as well as the corporate level, that is supportive of the change that manufacturing leaders will need to undergo to make in India succeed. The third objective is to specifically help the current leadership make the transition. And the fourth objective is to create a mechanism by which future leaders can be groomed to become effective manufacturing leaders to lead India beyond 2020. Absolutely. The Skill India mission is a complementary step to Make in India succeed. Of course, it also creates employment opportunities for a very large number of people. But there are 2 things that I would like to highlight as being essential, whether it is being taken care of in Skill India or otherwise. The first one is an increase in the capabilities of frontline joining the ranks in the plant has to be matched, just as I have said, with increase in the capabilities and improvement in the mindsets of the manufacturing leaders. So you can't have a situation where you've got a highly skilled and aspirational workforce joining manufacturing and yet contributing well enough with the leadership not supporting them. So Skill India has to be supported with improvement in the leadership capabilities of manufacturing leaders. The second point that I would like to highlight is that it's not just the technical skills which is important, but it's also the mindset of the people who are carrying those skills which is important. And there are 2 particular attributes that I would suggest be considered as part of the Skill India. First one is to help them work better in teams. Better working teams at the front line greatly enhance the contribution they can make to manufacturing. The second ability or attribute that I would suggest is their ability to think of their customers, which we see almost lacking at the frontline level. So if these two attributes can be combined with Skill India, I think we have got the right combination to make in India succeed. I could go on and on, but if I were to prioritize, I would say point number one, if you and your subordinates have been in the same role for more than 3 years, it's time for you to assume that they can perform your role. It's time for you to give way to them or engage them differently. The second point is, if you are looking at a mindset shift in the leadership team in your manufacturing unit, it needs to start at the top. The top cannot be an exception. My two don'ts are, if you are spending most of your time on operational issues, it's time you review the way you are working. There is possibly a lot of stuff that you could do differently and do better. The second don't is, do not underestimate the potential of your front line. There is a lot of ingenuity and a lot of talent that is there in the front line. It just needs to be unleashed and value unlocked for your manufacturing units.